Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. How are you? You're on mute.
But good. How are you?
Good.
How are you?
All good. I'm happy to have you all free here. It's been a long time. All
Yeah,
right.
we've
So,
sorted out the time zone issues and whatnot.
all right. So, everyone, we are already live on YouTube. We have, let me just check around, 150 viewers waiting, and there will be more coming soon. So, guys, the floor is yours.
Hey, Milton, I want to compliment you on the awesome video montage and the music while we were waiting. Really, really cool. All right. So, guys, here we are once again for the quarterly legislative roundup. So, if anyone has attended these before, they know the gentlemen that are going to be giving us all of their expertise. Bill Pascrell III from Princeton Public Affairs and Martin Litschka from Entain. So let's just jump into it, guys. It looks like everyone's in remote locations. Martin's in an airport somewhere in Brazil. Bill's in California. I'm in New Jersey, but yeah, but we wouldn't miss it. So here we go. All right, where to start, guys? So there have been a lot of developments, I guess, over the last quarter. We can spend the next hour briefing everyone on, what's changed in the U.S., what hasn't changed, what we think is coming. And maybe we should start with, I thought we'd start with the hot U.S. state right now with the latest developments, which is Florida. Why don't we just jump right into that? Bill, maybe you could kick off by giving us the latest on the tortured litigation situation in Florida, where the Seminole Hard Rock is in the process of launching sports betting in Florida, and whether you think that's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think.
Good morning from California. Hello, Martin. Hello, Jeremy. I know you're just back from Zurich, Jeremy.
I am.
So I hope you had a good trip last week. Haven't seen you in a bit. I really appreciate Zoltan always being so kind to us and having us on. It's been fun. I think this is our like sixth or seventh in a row. Dallas Baker's feeling left out. I just talked to him this morning. Martin, hope you're having a good trip out there in Brazil. So just full disclosure, Jeremy, can you hear me okay? Am I good?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Bill.
Okay, because I'm outside. I want to fully disclose, as we always do for transparency, I've represented Hard Rock International for the last 11 years. So I'm very close to this issue. Obviously, we want to talk about all the big states that haven't come across yet, but just over a year or so ago, Hard Rock launched, and Westgate and DraftKings and a bunch of other leaders in the market brought a lawsuit. And they were immediately shut down after just operating a couple of days. That decision by the federal district court, which allowed them to operate, was immediately appealed. And just yesterday, the Appellate Circuit Court of Appeals did not grant an en banc decision of the full court. And so on September 19th, should Westgate, the plaintiff, not pursue a petition to the Supreme Court of the United States, or alternatively try to file a state court remand, they're going to launch on the 19th of September. This is a credit to Jim Allen and the Hard Rock team. It's a credit to the Seminole tribe. And although he's not my political cup of tea. It's a credit to Governor DeSantis, who I'm sure is relieved because he's in the hustings in Ohio or Iowa and New Hampshire campaigning for president for the Republican nomination next year. I believe that Westgate has to take a serious pause here and determine whether they want to spend additional resources with a Supreme Court petition. I would imagine that the court will give it serious consideration. Whether they'll be able to get a further injunction based upon the petition to the court remains to be seen. But as it stands right now, it looks like Hard Rock is going to be able to launch on the 19th. And I don't have any inside information whether that's the plan, but they're certainly permitted to do that. And so this whole case, as you know, Jeremy full well, and certainly Martin, because you're both adept attorneys, hovers around the legality of the Indian Gaming Act and whether it was done lawfully and legally. I think it has been, as you know, previously, I think both Martin and I predicted that this would be the eventual outcome. And so it's pretty exciting. This will be the largest state in the nation to, as you know, Florida is the third largest state in the nation. It'll be the largest state in the nation to launch sports betting. And obviously it has massive opportunity and bandwidth. So I'm very optimistic that within the next less than a week, Hard Rock will launch, and we'll have to see what Westgate is deciding to do in terms of appeal process.
Bill, can you explain the just the structure, the regulatory structure? You know, obviously, Hard Rock will have a monopoly under the compact, but we've been getting lots of questions from other operators and B2Bs, looking to cut deals with pari-mutuels, et cetera. How is it structured? Who's going to control it? And are there opportunities for other parties, either retail or online, to somehow participate through Hard Rock?
Yeah, I mean, there is opportunity. It is, we don't really like to use the term, and I know why you've used it, because most others outside the Hard Rock world would use a monopoly. They have a compact with the state, as you know, Jeremy and Martin, for many, many years to operate their casinos throughout the state, in Hollywood and Tampa, et cetera. And this allows them, they believe, under the Indian Gaming Act, to continue to operate online and retail for sports betting. And so there's issues surrounding, what the Wire Act permits, what the Indian Gaming Act permits, where the servers have to be and all that. And we think that's all sorted. But the Hard Rock will also have opportunities for ancillary services and perhaps other partners to enter. That'll be predominantly determined by Hard Rock and the state government. Those decisions haven't been fully vetted yet. Hard Rock doesn't need anyone to launch next Tuesday, the 19th. But I know that Hard Rock is always interested in innovation, technology. And so, yes, there are opportunities. What they are, what they might be, will be directly derivative of Hard Rock's play here.
Okay. All right. Martin, do you have anything to add on Florida?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, very good afternoon / evening / morning, wherever you may be. Thanks for having me back. I apologize in advance for any background noise. I indeed happen to be at the Brasilia airport, and without going off tangent, big vote in the Brazilian as opposed to the US Federal Congress tonight on the online gambling law that now extends to online casino. So that's what I've been doing down here for the last 2 days. To Bill's point, and as I've said, I don't think that I could add much more to it, but in general, I would say that Florida is a perfect example of all the idiosyncrasies and quirks that one comes across, in particular one that still only relatively recently moved to the US when it comes to US gambling or sports betting regulations. So there's a tribe involved, as Bill said very pertinently. The tribe has negotiated a compact with the government, which has been challenged from within a variety of quarters. But long story short, and we've talked about it on these webinars before. Now the three, if not the four, sleeping behemoth amongst the US states. New York, they got 51% tax, which we're hopeful, Bill and I'm sure Jeremy as well, that our friend Senator Adelbo will manage to get change at some point, but we may not be that close to it. So you got New York with a sky-high tax, Florida with very restrictive form of entry, so effectively a monopoly, and then Texas and California are yet to regulate because, unfortunately, let's be honest with ourselves, despite our efforts, so we're still failing to convince the good folk of California and Texas to regulate the products that are so dear to our hearts. So all in all, I believe that besides the online gaming, online casino regulation, and I'm sure that we'll come on to that, those four states that I have just alluded to that are yet to regulate sports wagering will be critical to the future, hopefully sustainable future of the US market.
All right, so you mentioned the other three of the four big ones. So let's just kind of talk about those as well. California, we spent a lot of time over the last few quarters on these calls talking about California. I think everyone in this group sort of predicted that it was not going to get done last time. Have there been any movements over the last several months? Like I know both of you, Bill and Martin, are very involved in California. May have some insight into whether there's movement and whether this thing is going to happen next time around, and what can and should be done differently in terms of a referendum. And by the way, whether it can be done by legislation without a referendum.
Yeah, Jeremy, first of all, it's ironic. I'm here in California now, spent a lot of time here and a lot of work, as has Martin. It's a shame what's happened. California was one of the first states in the nation to try to bring online gaming 20 years ago. I haven't been able to get it across the Rubicon. It is my opinion first, and opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. California does require a ballot referendum to amend the Constitution and permit for gaming outside of what they have currently. But in fairness to California, there's a lot in this state. It's the largest state in the nation, almost 40 million people. The politics is crazy. The gaming politics is even crazier. You have tribes, both federally recognized and not federally recognized. You have over 50 federally recognized tribes. You have poker rooms, you have racetracks, you have lottery, you have all competing interests. I think what I was hoping was going to happen, Jeremy, and you, Martin, and I have talked about this a bit, both on these calls and in other venues. I would hope that after the colossal failure of the ballot referendum 27 last year, there were two competing ballot referendums, 26, which the tribes put up, and 27, which the industry put up. I would have hoped that a lesson would have been learned. I don't see any evidence that it has been, but there have been other distractions. I understand, and I'm not being critical just for the sake of being critical, but the ballot referendum failed miserably. Failing in an election is, there's 50-50 chance when there's two competing interests. So, if you fail by a few points, that's okay. The ballot referendum started out in the low 30s. And by the time election day came, it barely got 18% of the vote, which is an abysmal disaster and failure. The question is, why hasn't there been a more concerted, focused effort for the industry to sit down with the tribes? I'm not saying anybody's better than anybody else, but the tribes who are here, who not only have operations ongoing and concerns, but they also have massive political capital. What does that mean? What do politicians care about? Three things: voters, money, and media. The tribes have two of those in a very substantial way. They have substantial resources and assets, capital, and they have massive voters, which, I'm not trying to cast aspersions and say they control those votes, but those votes pretty much move the way the tribal chiefs advocate that they move. So each of those tribes have thousands of votes that they bring to the table. The fact that this failed so miserably, we're bumping up on 10 months now, or we are past 10 months since the failure last November. You cannot put this back on the ballot until 2024. I don't see that happening in a presidential year. I also think that because of the lack of support for this ballot referendum, 18%, politicians on both sides of the aisle are very loathsome to revisit this. The tribal ballot referendum, which was really put up as a blocking and tackling effort, did far better than the industry-backed referendum. So you would have thought by now there'd be a reset button where they come together at a table and try to negotiate a resolution to this. And I'm not saying that's easy, but you got to get in a room and respect each other and have a conversation. The tribes are concerned about the impact this will have to allow others to come in. And that's understandable, right? So this is not going to happen, I think, next year. I really don't see it happening because you have elections, both congressional, U.S. Senate, and presidential in California next year. And I just don't think people want to touch this again. And I don't see it happening, although maybe the industry is going to continue to do what they're doing, is just plow on forward. This is the most expensive ballot referendum in the history of California. Over $600 million spent on the pro Prop 27 side. That doesn't put into consideration what the tribes spent to promote their ballot referendum while also opposing Prop 27. And then just for historical context, Jeremy, if you'll permit me, the only entity of any consequence, and I would put it mildly, that supported Prop 27 outside of the operators that were behind it was Major League Baseball. And I don't think that's moving the dial. I don't think many people, although I have my Yankee hat on, and we won 2 games yesterday back-to-back with Boston, which was I'm very thrilled about. I don't think the Yankees are going to have a great year because I think it's really challenging for them to make the playoffs. But, every major newspaper, the California Democratic Committee, California Republican Committee, the Speaker, the Senate President, the Governor, the minority leaders, the majority leaders, most members of Congress, most mayors, most newspapers, the NAACP, the teachers union, all opposed this ballot referendum. And that has a lot to do with politics, but in order to get a ballot referendum passed, it's not like trying to elect Jeremy Kleiman to be governor of New Jersey. It's a different Megillah when you're advocating for a constitutional ballot referendum. It's hard, it's not easy work. And they have to retool and rethink. So I think the best chance California has of moving this will be perhaps 2025, 2026 at the earliest. And that's unfortunate, But the final point, the seminal question is, if I am a Californian registered to vote, I'm most likely, if I care about sports betting, I'm already betting on sports, whether I go to the local bookie in town, or I go to the black market, or I go to Vegas across the borders, or Washington or Oregon, or Arizona. Is it really that important to me as a person? The industry's got to do a better job of advocating for that. And they also have to do a better job of sitting down at the table with the major stakeholder of the tribes.
So Martin, what do? You're part of the industry, right? We just sit it out for the next 3 years? Or, is there work to be done from the operator side now in some type of coordinated effort to try to lay the groundwork over the next 3 years? Or do we just give up and say, you know what, for all the reasons Bill said, nothing's happening next year. It's probably going to be 3 years at least. It's a mess. Nobody wants to go down in flames again. So we're just going to give up.
Well, first of all, for the record, I would definitely vote for you, Jeremy, for governor of New Jersey, because you're the greatest New Jerseyan outside of the Pasquale family, I know. So hopefully Bill's not running, because then I would be in trouble and definitely sitting on the proverbial fence. Perhaps I would vote for you both. But on a serious note, as Bill has said, retooling is the critical word, I believe. I'm not aware and won't be as big-headed as to say that I would necessarily be aware of all initiatives that may be deployed, but I'm not aware of any ongoing initiative, soul-searching initiative relating to California. Indeed, as Bill pointed out as well, in theory, it can go back on the ballot next year, and if by some kind of a miracle as things stand now, let's not fool ourselves and let's be honest with ourselves, it got approved and the market would launch in 25, but yeah, we're already looking at 25, 26, if that. And again, I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but just like in any other lobbying or regulatory project, you, even before coming in, you do need to ascertain the local cultural, social, and other idiosyncrasies. So indeed, the sorry and sad mistake that we made as an industry, if I have any right to speak on behalf of the industry, is not to have struck either a deal or agree on a joint position with the tribes. Because indeed, the tribes are the powerhouses in California. So that was the first error, unfortunately. And then the second one, and I believe we would have discussed this at these meets before. And I can't be in California this year. I was the last year, and the Prop 26 so-called adverts were on TV throughout my stay. And they look like Back to the Future, coming back from the 80s. And I would also think that the good folk of California really struggled to take the proverbial leap of faith and connect whatever dots there might have been between combating homelessness and sports betting. Because in my view, there are none. There's no logical connection but the funds that would have been generated. So long story short, I'm still hopeful that we will get California across the proverbial line, having jumped across the Rubicon. But that, in my view, would require, as I've said, retooling and relying on and focusing on two key arguments: responsible gambling, and hand in hand with that, or actually the starting point, is combating black market operators. To Bill's other point, whatever we may be thinking, well, we know for a fact that there are Californians that do bet in one way or another. They may cross the border to Nevada, or they may go all the way up to Washington State or any other state that's regulated sports betting, or unfortunately, they might be inclined, owing to the lack of regulation, to continue betting with their street bookie or unlicensed sports betting providers license, if license at all, of a tiny little rock in the Caribbean. So talking about tiny little rocks without trying to be too cynical, and with all due respect to California, even our friends in Curacao are now revamping their online gambling regulations. So they have embraced it. So very long story short, I'll say the word again. Bill, you're absolutely right. Retooling, I would also call it soul searching, and perhaps take advantage of the fact that the ecosystem in California, be it political, the social fabric, is not yet ready for it, clearly following the epic failure. So take advantage of what's left of 23 and use 24 to come up with razor sharp, laser focused campaign that would revolve around the collaboration with the tribes and the other local stakeholders. Then I believe that as an industry, we may stand a chance, if not a much better chance, of getting it done.
Seems to me the only winners were the consultants who were paid obscene amounts of money to design a terrible campaign that didn't resonate, thinking about on Prop 27. All right, cool. So let's now swing down southeast from California and talk about Texas. So Texas is another one of those sleepers that, you know, everyone thought something would actually happen, and it hasn't. Why don't you give us like the latest on Texas and where things stand?
Well, Texas only meets every other year. And I am pretty optimistic, Jeremy and Martin. And by the way, if I may, Jeremy, you're the moderator and the boss here, but we just got notice that there's over 400 people listening in on this. So that's wonderful. Zoltan always gets a great crowd across many channels, but that's a nice crowd. Texas is a very, very interesting state. They don't really have a history at all of gaming. They have horse racing and lottery, no casinos, massive amounts of Texans go across state borders to gamble in the bordering states, which all have multiple forms of gaming. We came close this year, but we came up short again. And I say we because we're all very interested in moving the dial there. The lieutenant governor is getting there, but not there yet. And the lieutenant governor in Texas is very powerful and important. And I believe he's doing his best to get educated on this and to try to appreciate the best way to move forward. So the soonest this can be done is spring of 25. It cannot be done next year. They're not in session. I said this to multiple media outlets, but I want to say it here, as this is an important channel for me and hopefully for all of us. I think there's a 90% chance that Texas will go in the spring of 25. I think there's 100% chance that if it doesn't go, then it'll go in 27. But I'm very optimistic. We came very close this year. And Texas is working their way through it. There was a massive effort to educate the legislature and the lieutenant governor. Governor Abbott has said publicly he supports it. And I believe he's committed to that. But, you know, we're going to have another governor's race in a couple of years there. So, you know, you want to kind of get it done in 25 before you have another significant change in the politics of the state. And so I'm very optimistic about Texas. Texas has a rich culture in terms of horse racing and lottery, doesn't have a rich culture in casinos. So we know that is sort of a bit of the rub. But, you know, you have the Mark Cubans of the world. You have the Tillman Fertittas. the Jerry Joneses of the world, the major sports teams that have all been working aggressively on this. And I believe that they're close. But the other part about it is we're 18 months away from, having the opportunity to do it, and things can change during that time. We may have, as Martin has been advocating and trailblazing in America, and he's definitely the thought leader on this for sure, on responsible gaming. We have to be very careful that there's no dodgy information coming out about, a trampoline effect on gambling addiction or responsible gaming issues or cybersecurity issues. We just saw what happened recently with MGM and the cyber breach to them. And it's no fault of MGM's, but that creates concern in the industry. It also creates opportunity. So again, I'm very optimistic that Texas can go in a little over 18 months, and keeping my fingers crossed that will happen.
All right. Well, that's a bold prediction. 90% confidence. Pretty impressive. So, let's talk about the sports teams in Texas, because I know that's a significant factor. So you mentioned Jerry Jones and Mark Cuban. What role? Why are they so important in this push in Texas, and what role will the professional sports teams, if any, play as this thing plays out, and if it launches?
They're going to be the license holders. Don't forget Tillman, and there's multiple other organizations from lacrosse to WNBA to soccer, et cetera. Those are the three, massive brand names. They have massive roots in the state and massive political capital. They know how to lobby. They understand how to lobby. They will be the license holders, all of the venues. When Texas finally goes, at least that was the current proposition that just came a little short in May when the legislature came to an end. So that does not mean, by the way, that there aren't opportunities. Every operator out there, particularly the tier 1 operators, will be partnered with those sports teams. But that requires rev share, much like you have in multiple states with the casino skin, or the sports betting skin. So it's you got to kind of just take your head out of the normalcy of, brick and mortar casinos typically being the license holder. And now it's going to be the sports teams.
Right,
They'll-
like Arizona.
Correct. They'll have the retail, and then you'll bring the other operators in for the online piece.
Okay. So Martin, unless you have anything to add about Texas, I wanted to swing back up to New York and hear your thoughts on the, continuing mediocrity in New York sports betting, thanks to the absurd tax rate. And whether you think Addabbo can get something done.
First of all, my apologies again for the background noise. I swear to you all that when I sat down, this was the quietest corner at the airport. Now I've got staff walking past me, and there's a guy shooting a music video and all that. But I'll do my best. Perhaps, a few words on Texas, if you allow me. Indeed, Texas is an epitomization of a culture clash in my book. Now, on the one hand, a very conservative state with, as long as I remember correctly, the 3 tribal casinos, but no other gaming properties. So no culture, no history, coupled with the conservatism. On the other hand, hugely popular sports teams that I suppose would give their left hand, if not their right hand, to have sports betting, just like their peers from other states. So perhaps I wouldn't be as bold as Bill and say, oh, there's a 90% chance, but the chance is certainly increasing, because now we've had 2 rounds of sparring, in particular with the lieutenant governor, and the word on the street was that while pondering sports betting. He was also trying to find a way to allow for additional non-tribal gaming properties to enter the state of Texas. So here's another issue, because I suppose the tribes, albeit not as powerful and not as numerous as the California ones, may not be too pleased. So there's this mixed bag of issues and a huge cauldron, and everybody pours stuff in and stirs that elixir. But long story short, again, I believe that Texas will go, potentially might even beat California to it. As a side note, I promise, because it would be too painful for all three of us, that I will not talk about football. But Bill, you're tempting me. Now you'll talk about Jerry Jones, and I will not talk about the Yankees either. But that hat on your hat, it's really difficult to resist that temptation. But I will behave. And talking about the Yankees, hopefully a good segue to talk about New York. Now, I believe last time or before that, when we were here, both Bill and I would have reported back that we'd met numerous times with our dear colleague and friend, Senator Addabbo, and for good reason. He was very pleased with the tax revenue that the sports wagering regulation has produced for the New York state coffers. Said that, fast forward some 7-8 months, it's still very good from their perspective, but I believe that they're slowly but surely coming to a realization that the fat years, if you will not last forever. And that's because, again, let's be honest with ourselves, it simply does not pay off investing into the New York market. The 9 operators that entered the market, I remain of the view most of them would have done it for the totemic value, I suppose, of New York City and the state of New York. A lot of their partners would have wanted them to do that as well, because needless to say, most, if not all, the leagues happen to have offices in the city where we go to pay our respects and pay them a visit. But in the long run, this is simply not sustainable. And whereas early last year, when New York launched, the city was literally plastered all over with advertising, gambling advertising, sports betting advertising, that's all gone. So that's telling as well. So there is certainly a plan, and hopefully, Bill, you might know better, the governor will embrace it as well. But there's certainly a plan coming from within the quarters of our friends Addabbo and Pretlow to at least try to reduce the tax that applies to sports wagering. And of course, the other critical issue that New York's been grappling with in the last few years is the potential regulation of online casino. They've got their hands full with the 3 downstate, which I suppose really is a shorthand or moniker for saying New York City casino. So they've been very busy with that and that tender process. But I suppose, at least can imagine, once that's out of the way, then they will give online casino, online gaming a try in their next year's session. They've already tested the waters. So I'm hopeful that armed and equipped with that knowledge, they will be in a position to get the votes. I'm not as brave as Bill to say that there's a 90% chance it will happen, but just like in Texas, in my book, the chance of online casino in the state of New York is ever increasing, and 2024 would be a good year for it, just like any other year.
So you guys think that there'd be some type of omnibus legislation that would combine iGaming with reduced tax rate on sports, right? Bill, you're on mute.
Yeah, I had a little noise in the background. Let me say a few things. Addabbo dropped multiple bills. He dropped the bill to reduce the tax rate, provide for 4 more skins, and drop the tax rate nearly in half. 2, he dropped the fixed odds horse racing bill. 3, he dropped the bill to allow for online gaming. All of that, I think, has a lot of work to do, but all of those issues got pushed out because of there's only so much oxygen in the room. I hate using that term, but that's the best way to describe it. 2 other competing interests which I think can be collaborative and overlaid, but hasn't been yet, is the downstate issue. There's going to be 3 downstate casino licenses issued retail. Predominantly, we know where 2 of them are going. The question is, where's the 3rd? There's a lot of competition there. We know, for example, Bally's just bought Trump's golf links. And the politicians in New York want to get Trump Golf, which is a massive sign that's cut into the grass with stone. They want to get that out, but Bally's said they're only removing it if they get a casino license. I thought that was brilliant. It's a good way to stay in the game. And Sue Kim and Bally's are very good at what they do. We also know that Genting and MGM and Hard Rock. There's Sands. There's massive interest and massive competition. This was all supposed to have been sorted by October 1. This is going into the first quarter of next year at the least, in order to be able to have the commission determine who the 3 would-be license holders are. And there's all kinds of appeal processes which will happen. There's a lot going on with that. That is taking the majority of the oxygen out of the room. That's been the focus. Governor Hochul wants to get that done. I'm not saying it's an easy task. That also has a lot of play and push in New Jersey, because what's Atlantic City going to do if there's downstate casinos? Are they going to just, survive, or are they going to determine that they may want to push for North Jersey casinos and get rev share out of that? Number 1. Number 2, Belmont was lobbying very aggressively and successfully to get $420 million to renovate Belmont for the Breeders' Cup. And so that got done. There are some appeals that are going on, but now that issue is sorted, and Belmont has massive, NYRA has massive lobbying capital in the state. One issue is now sorted. Let's hope that this casino issue gets sorted. But I anticipate that Senator Addabbo, who I was just with in Saratoga just about a month ago, I guess it was August 15th, 16th at the NYRA conference, he's still aggressively advocating for a reduction in the tax because he has seen what has happened. And kudos to him. Many politicians don't admit, when they've been sort of educated on an issue or were wrong. I mean, a 51% tax rate is just colossally negative towards innovation and further investment in capital. So I believe that there is a very good chance for the tax rate to get revisited next year. But as you know, it's very hard to reduce the tax rate. And I think there's also going to be a lot of conversation around whether it should be 28% from 51 or is there a place in the middle that people can meet. As Dave Reebok predicted, and I know the 2 of you have heard him say this, he wasn't concerned about New York having a diminutive effect on New Jersey. And New York did very well earlier this year when they first launched, but those numbers are coming back to reality. They're flattening out. If I was an operator, I'd buy a helicopter company or a limousine or bus company and transport my customers over to New Jersey and or Pennsylvania, where the tax rate's massively lower. So, the casino downstate issue is going to take a lot of political attention, as well as this tax rate issue. I know that Addabbo is committed to doing both fixed odds horse racing and online gaming, but I don't think we're close on either of those issues right now. I don't see those issues, although I'm advocating and lobbying for them. I just don't see them happening next year, but I've been wrong before and hopefully I'm wrong here.
Let's hope you're wrong. Let's hope you're wrong.
Well, but what we should maybe pivot to, since we both talked about New York, in Texas and Florida and California. Maybe we should talk about a really positive issue, which happened one of the smallest states in the nation, not the smallest, but one of them, is Rhode Island was the only state to move iGaming this year.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so Bally's has the exclusive, but there's massive opportunity for B2Bs. So that's moving full steam ahead. And I know that the Rhode Island Lottery and State Police are working on overdrive to get companies approved and up and running quickly. So that's all good news. That's all good news. So let's pivot now. Martin, since you're wearing a suit and tie, I know you dressed up for this webinar. And since you are the foremost expert on responsible gaming, do we have something to celebrate this month?
That's too kind, as always. Thank you very much. I'll take the compliment. By the way, before I go there, those of you who are watching us right now and are based in the New York metropolitan area, you will receive as your bonus a free ride on the Pascal Tours bus and some free bets from an operator of your choice, because Bill will be bussing you, if not flying you, under or across the Hudson River. As usual, I totally agree with him. It's a great business plan, because certainly New Jersey firmly remains the lead-in, and we're proud of that, remain the lead-in online gambling and sports wagering state in the nation. Because this month, September, happens to be the RG Education month in the US. It's, quite frankly, every month should be RG Education month if we're still aspiring to achieve long-term sustainability in our industry. To answer your question, Jeremy, I do believe that we've got several reasons to celebrate. You know, you would have seen, and I appreciate, well, just like Bill stated, his potential, if not conflict of interest, then talked about his clients, then of course this could be my potential conflict of interest, the fact that Entain owns 50% of BetMGM, but BetMGM throughout the NFL season that has now started, needless to say, will be including prominent displays of responsible gambling messages and the responsible gambling program they have deployed at 9 NFL grounds, including not the teams that we would be supporting, but including the likes of the Chiefs, so premier teams in the league. And I believe this is something to be celebrated, and other operators have launched similar initiatives at the same time. And the bill that our by now friend Representative Tonko dropped nearly half a year ago is a testament to the fact that there's still more, if not much more, to be done. Of course, we talked about Tonko's bill here before. Bill, I'm sure you will come on to that. You had a chance to debate Tonko in Saratoga with a great success, not in terms of who would have won or lost the debate, but you had a great debate, which is always helpful. But what I'm really trying to say is that while the industry has made considerable strides within the framework of the soul searching exercise related to responsible gambling, there are still issues to be addressed, like the future of sustainable advertising. Will the public finally get fed up with having to watch sports betting advert every single minute while watching their favorite football team battling out with another one, or with the baseball playoffs coming up and the World Series? You get my meaning. So that's certainly a whole array of issues that need to be addressed. Plus, of course, let's remind ourselves of that. And Bill and I have been, we're still actually on our little or ever growing regulatory tour up and down the nation, talking to regulators about responsible gambling. So to give them kudos yet again, Colorado, Ohio, in particular, New Jersey, other states have plucked up the courage and introduced much more robust responsible gambling standards. And I do expect not only to celebrate the RG Education Month, that others will follow, led by Massachusetts. Some of you would know that Massachusetts put out an RFI, i.e. a request for information around their future responsible gambling program and system. They've got a very, very potent and robust RG program that applies in their casinos and to their casinos, but they're looking into what they could be doing on the still recently regulated sports wagering side of things. So there are more and more reasons to celebrate, hopefully fewer and fewer shameless and by now infamous New York Times articles. But at the same time, as always, there's much more that can be done when it comes to both shouting from the rooftops. And as an industry, I would suggest we're still not that great at that, about all the good stuff that we've already done, while continuing to deploy improvements and enhancements to not only our RG policies, but also our RG protocols and systems.
Okay. So let's just touch on advertising. I mean, it's obviously related to RG. We've seen some regulators recently impose really heavy fines for advertising violations, Ohio, Ontario, Massachusetts. You think that trend is going to continue where the hammer is going to come down from the regulators until the industry starts to do a better job of policing themselves?
Well, first of all, I think it's important what Martin talked about, and I want to just put an exclamation point or bold in it. Congressman Tonko introduced the bill last year, the fall of last year, that would ban advertising in sports betting. Martin and I have had the privilege and pleasure of meeting with him, and then I had the privilege and pleasure of debating him in Saratoga last month. The bill is well-intentioned. He has a big heart. He's a very smart man. He's concerned about mental health, and it has always been. He's not a newcomer to this issue. And what we're trying to explain both to the industry and to Congressman Tonko is don't just look at what you think is the obvious. First of all, the industry needs to understand that simply because Congressman Tonko is a Democrat and in the minority doesn't mean that bill isn't getting some traction, because as Martin well knows and has pointed out, he's collaborating now with Congressman Joyce, who's starting to gain some interest, who's a Republican. Congressman Joyce is from Ohio. And what the industry oftentimes does is takes a casual pedestrian view of things. We've been in early with Congressman Tonko trying to explain to him that although his bill is well intended, the consequence if that bill were to ever to reach daylight would not accomplish what he wants to accomplish. If you ban advertising, it's going to drive more people to the black market. It's going to drive more people to issues concerning mental health and problem gambling. Yes, this is a long-winded way of saying, Jeremy, I do think there's going to be more regulatory reach in terms of fines and penalties, and we know what just happened. We don't know the full story of it. We know what just happened earlier this week with DraftKings and the 9/11 advertisement, which I'm sure DraftKings higher ups, didn't support, but it has given them a bit of a black eye, and I'm sure they're going to sort through that. Advertising and regulating advertising is important, but banning it is not a solution, and I'm vehemently opposed to that. And so we're going to continue our dialogue with Congressman Tonko, but whether you think that Democrats will ever come back into the majority or not is not the point. A lot of regulators and legislators and governors are now looking at that bill and are entertaining banning advertising at the state level. And that's the concern we have.
Yeah, if I may, absolutely, perhaps, because you've mentioned Ontario. Jeremy, which has very quickly gained the position of prominence within the industry because the regulatory regime they put in place has turned out to be, I suppose, as largely predicted, very, very successful. Although, to your point, they now seem to be sort of backpedaling when it comes to some aspects of advertising. I'm sure most, if not all, the audience will know that after some procrastination, dithering, and having faced a set of political issues, they finally, as in the Ontario regulator, published a new rules that ban the use of celebrities, in particular athletes, both active and retired, for gambling advertising purposes. And from my personal perspective, I have some sympathy, actually a lot of sympathy, having worked with the leagues and the NCAA on the sports integrity and anarchy side of things, with preventing and prohibiting active athletes from engaging in sports wagering and gambling related advertising. But I don't have that much sympathy, if any sympathy at all, with preventing retired athletes from engaging with advertising and becoming ambassadors, because quite frankly, yeah, you may either call them retired athletes, but at the same time, and of course they've got most of them still have a big following, but at the same time they're retired folks just like many others. You know, they no longer happen to be athletes. And actually, and again, we've talked about it here, linking it back to the discussion we've just had around responsible gambling on this call and previous. You know, these folks are the most efficient and greatest ambassadors of that particular cause. Granted, Ontario has carved responsible gambling messages from the ban, which is much appreciated, but I believe that an even more efficient policy would be to ban active athletes from promoting gambling, but giving the retired athletes an opportunity to engage with our industry. As you also might know, both the AGCO and the IGO, the two regulatory / commercial bodies up in Ontario, they've got new leadership. Hopefully there is an opportunity to revisit some of the aspects of that regulation, but indeed, back to the points that both Jeremy and Bill have made, because all the US states and Ontario plus Alberta that is touted to regulate in not too distant future, they're all looking at one another. So they might draw inspiration from all that. Again, Canada is of course different from the United States. So there would be First Amendment issues, and it would affect the level of veneration and esteem that we hold the US athletes in, but still, it could be a dangerous precedent coupled with everything Bill has said in connection with Representative Tonko's bill. So that would be my take. As always, a bumpy but entertaining ride ahead.
Hey, Jeremy, and final point. I want to be careful because I don't want to be misunderstood, but tobacco bans on advertising, alcohol bans on advertising have proven to be ill conceived and haven't accomplished anything. Okay, so I don't want to compare us to those industries, but in terms of banning advertising, we come from a nation with First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and we're going to ban advertising. I think it's a bad look, well intended, but a bad look. And I'm hopeful that we could do a better job increasingly advocate and educate, because it would have a deleterious effect on what they're trying to accomplish.
Bill, I totally agree, 100%.
Thank you.
So thank you both. Looks like we are out of time. As always, this was a great hour, a lot of fun. Zoltan, thank you as always for hosting us and inviting us to participate. And we'll do it again next time.
You are welcome, guys, and thank you so much for the great inputs. And yeah, we'll see each other next time. Bill, I will see you in 2 weeks in Budapest. Yeah, Jeremy, by the way, I was near Zurich, like 16 kilometers when you were there. I was
had I known.
I was doing the world championship duathlon near that near village. So yeah, but I could not make the travel to Zurich.
Too bad. All right, next time, next
Yeah,
time.
next time.
All right, my friend.
So we
Thanks from me, Zoltan. And
everyone.
if you happen to have a trip down to Brazil, I'll be here till early October. Oh,
All
call on
right,
us.
we'll keep that in mind. All right, guys. So
All right,
we go.
see you guys.